coincidence. Nothing happens by coincidence, something as big as this. It's shocking, it's shameful, it is deplorable. A certain ideology has been perpetuated. They should have ordered an independent investigation. Everything is being censored. If you've ever watched Mr. Modi trying to hug these white leaders of the world, every time I cringe.
Professor Yadav, thank you so much for joining us. You have the lofty honour of being the first guest in our new series, State of States, which is a travelling series where we explore democratic systems and governance around the world. Now, I've travelled India for the past 6 months. I've had a wonderful time in your extraordinary country. It's easily the most diverse country that I've ever travelled. But it does seem to me that there is something politically problematic about the state of affairs. So my first question is a relatively broad one. What is currently happening in Indian politics today?
In a sense, what's happening in India is very much part of what's happening all over the world. There were times when we thought democracy was secure, the only game in town, and a stable system to which everyone in the world was gravitating towards. But things have suddenly unraveled all over. We cannot speak of democracy and non-democracy anymore. Most of the countries in the world would be some form of hybrid or the other. I suspect something similar is happening in India. 12 years ago, I would have said India is a stable democracy. Democracy is the only game in town. Indian democracy has overcome some of the initial obstacles, and it's an exceptional case of success, not only because India was poor, less educated, and democracy was not supposed to take roots, but also because India was so diverse, something that you mentioned. And it was assumed that in conditions of deep diversity, you cannot have one single nation and democracy. India had defied all odds to be a case of success. And then suddenly, just when no one thought it would unravel, things started going bad. And it's been a downhill story. My own sense, if you ask me today, is people like me, when we wrote books of this kind, something that I wrote, I think around 2010-11, we were way bit complacent about what had happened. And if I were to describe Indian democracy today, I would say it is competitive authoritarianism, which is to say competition does exist, but only in episodes around elections. For the rest of the period, it's soft authoritarian regime. We are not yet an electoral autocracy, so we are not a Putin's Russia yet. But we're very much like Turkey, like Hungary, or like Sri Lanka used to be a year and a half ago. That's where, unfortunately, India is today.
Well, as you mentioned, a lot has changed in the last 12 years. There's an old Franklin D. Roosevelt quote that in politics, nothing happens by accident. In your estimation, could Modi's ascendancy and political domination over the last dozen years, could it be viewed as anything but a coincidence?
Of course, it's not a coincidence. Nothing happens by coincidence. Something as big as this, a tectonic shift like this, cannot happen by accident. So Mr. Modi is coming in 2014, and the country's what would be called a rightward turn, broadly speaking, a turn towards majoritarianism, turn towards what in India is called communalism, which is the dominance of Hindu majority community being presented. Right-wing turn in terms of economic policies, brazen promotion of select corporate houses. All this could not have happened in vacuum. At the same time, I would not wish to say that this was inevitable. I call it democracy capture. Democracy capture could have happened in different stages. If you ask me today, as someone who's seen the history of Indian democracy, When was Indian democracy most vulnerable to something like this? Oddly, it was the 1950s. India had just experienced partition. Millions had been killed. There was deep resentment. And just as Pakistan came apart at that point as democracy, and later on as a country, India could have had all that. So if there was a moment, a ripest moment for something like this, it was 1950s. India could have gone into a slump in 1960s because of 3 famines, wars, very bad situation. We survived. 1975 to 1977 was the emergency when, using a constitutional provision, constitution was practically shut down. India survived that. And just when those conditions did not obtain, just when it seemed India was economically doing better, that there was political stability, is when this capture takes place. It is not coincidence. It is not an accident, because a certain ideology has been perpetuated quietly, just under the broad liberal secular veneer. This kind of poison has been injected for a very long time, led by an organization called the RSS, which is, I wouldn't say is fascist or semi-fascist. I don't like those descriptions for Indian things. But this is an organization which has systematically been pleading, preparing the ground for, creating energies for a majoritarian takeover of India, of converting India from a secular country to a country where one religion dominates, and effectively within that religion, the upper caste dominate. That ideology has been at work, and unfortunately those parties and formations that were in charge of maintaining the secular fabric of Indian constitution, I think they've just been very complacent. They've been very lazy. They've been very cut off from the people. India's secular elite speaks English, the language I'm speaking to you with. That doesn't connect to anyone in this country. So not only do they speak English language, but their metaphors, their imagery, everything is drawn from a certain Western context. So there is a huge gap between India's elite, liberal and secular as it might be, and ordinary people's consciousness. You know, if you read novels of 19th century Russia, you find that, Russian elite that speaks French and is not connected to the Russian peasantry at all. Something similar happens in India. And what the RSS and the BJP did was that they quietly went into this subterranean zone. And just when no one suspected, a capture took place. Of course, a capture requires a determined leader as well, someone with that kind of energy and skill. And whatever else you might say about Mr. Modi, he does have skills.
Yeah. And so obviously there's been a rise of, or the formation of groups like the RSS, and they've been able to accumulate more and more influence, as you've just mentioned. Are there specific vulnerabilities unique to India's democratic system that has allowed that? And what can or should be done in the future to mitigate against that?
The specific vulnerabilities were 2 or 3. Number 1, the institutional edifice of Indian democracy has always been weak. We saw that during the emergency, when practically all institutions crumbled. Even the Supreme Court of India gave in at that time to Mrs. Gandhi's authoritarian streak. Institutions have not recovered. They have always been weak, and under political pressure, institutions give in. Therefore, change of party. So there comes a political party which represents values that are unconstitutional. But no one in the civil services, bureaucracy, or any institution stands up to say, hey, that's not what the Constitution says. You may be the ruler, but you can't get me to do these things. Practically no one does that. All institutions crumble one after another. That's an inherent weakness which we've had for the last 75 years. The second weakness is an ideological cultural weakness. You do not have a secular democratic republic and just live with it forever. You rebuild it in popular imagination. In a country which had just gone through partition, which had been through millions of killings, in that country to say, no, we shall be secular. This country shall not discriminate between Hindus and Muslims. This must have been a very audacious act, an act of great imagination, an act where the leadership enjoyed enormous trust with the people to say, I know you come from that side, I know your sister was raped and killed, I know your mother was thrown into a well, but now in this country you will not distinguish between this religion and that religion. It required building a culture that existed after independence, thanks to the long shadow of India's freedom struggle, which was an extraordinary freedom struggle. I dare say, if in 20th century I can think of two great movements, one would be the South African struggle against apartheid, and second is India's struggle for freedom. And in both cases, they refused to be racist. In South Africa, they had every reason to be racist, counter-racist. They did not. Similarly, Indian freedom struggle was not against English, not against British. It espoused universal values. So we had a shadow of that for a few years, 10, 20 years. After that, someone had to rebuild it. Someone had to recreate that imagination. Secularism, socialism, democracy, republic, these things don't exist in vacuum. They are not born with you. You have to convince every new generation that Hindus may be 80% in this country, but unless minorities are secure, this country is not secure. It's not a simple thought. You have to cultivate that thought. And I think that's the real vulnerability, that this was not done. India's elite, ruling elite, which may be small, but they ruled practically everything in this country. They were on top of all the institutions. They controlled the media. They wrote the textbooks. They were the thought leaders. And yet, they failed to cultivate younger generations which would live through these values. And in particular, there was almost a criminal negligence on the part of people like us, of negligence of being inattentive to the value of nationalism. Nationalism is the currency. In a country which has fought against colonial rule, nationalism does not mean what nationalism means in Europe. We tend to have a vicarious guilt about nationalism. A post-colonial country needn't have that. Indian nationalism was a positive nationalism. It was not a nationalism pitted against any neighbor. Second, there was a negligence of languages and cultures. Indian elite is so completely cut off from the culture of this country, and that creates a distance. And third, there was a negligence of religion. Religion was seen as a source of superstitions, source of problems, and all kinds of weird things. And all the positives that came with religion were not looked at in a country where more than 95% people are believers. So this, to my mind, is the bigger vulnerability, disconnect between the formal edifice of liberal democratic republic and the subterranean culture, popular culture.
In the first half of the 20th century, a lot of the national conversation wasn't centered around national democracy. It was about national independence. The notable exception to that was Dr. Ambedkar, who posited that political democracy is contingent on social and economic democracy. Do you think that contradiction lies at the heart of India's present troubles?
It is one of the problems, one of the key problems. I do not think that lies at the heart of the BJP capture today. The BJP RSS capture is, as I said earlier, is a capture by the upper caste as well. While BJP RSS would like us to believe that they stand for the Hindus, the core of what they stand for is the domination of the upper caste, that upper varna among the Hindus. So in that sense, what Dr. Ambedkar alerted us to was true. At the same time, I wouldn't say that the prioritizing national independence over social justice was the principal reason why we have ended up where we have. That was a fault line. It was a fault line not addressed. It came to play much later in the 1980s through what was called Mandela, which is the rise of the lower castes in the social order. And it is playing out now. And Dr. Ambedkar did alert us to the fact that while we were entering an era of one person, one vote, there was no parallel equality in social and economic terms. So a political equality was sitting very thinly on a society with very deep social and economic inequalities. So an element of that is playing out today. But I would not see Mr. Modi's rise as principally informed by that. This is a fault line that has always existed. And mind you, India is not the only country which has faced a caste-specific fault line is very Indian. But to have political democracy in conditions of extreme inequality is something that you've had across countries, and inequalities have increased. Look at Brazil, look at South Africa. So we need to keep that in mind.
Now, you've spoken a lot about the systematic pressure acting down upon the few remaining windows of free expression in the Indian media landscape. What is the state of affairs in India's media landscape? What's your assessment of it?
It's shocking, it's shameful, it is deplorable. I was 13, 14-year-old when we had emergency in India. So I remember those days. I wasn't old enough to do anything about it, but I was old enough to remember what happened. I know media was silenced. There was very limited media. There was no television at that time. Newspapers were silenced. But newspapers could protest by carrying empty editorials, blank editorials. And everyone knew that the newspaper was being censored. What is happening today is much worse. It is much worse partly because no one knows that everything is being censored. And indeed, it is being censored. And it is not a general sense. There is a micromanagement. There are persons acting on behalf of the PM who broadly take a look at what would be the headline in each newspaper tomorrow. It's that kind of micromanagement. And it is worse because now we have independent media. Now we have independent television channels. So for a large number of people, unlike the emergency when we had the official All India radio, now it appears as if these are independent multiple voices, but all of them being controlled and censored. That's something that doesn't get to people. And what they did not do even during the emergency is that the news media did not get after the opposition like a pack of wolves. This is what's happening today. Every large media organization looks for an opportunity to get after the opposition in ways that are utterly vulgar. So basically, someone in the ruling party sets the tone, and then everyone plays it out. In fact, they are 2 steps ahead of it. During the emergency, yes, they said Mrs. Gandhi is great, things are absolutely fine in this country, but they did not stoke hatred of one community against another community. That's what the Indian media is doing today. So it's absolutely shocking, and there are multiple levels of it. One is there's an overall ideological capture. because Indian media is dominated by just that very tiny caste and class, which the RSS wants to, whose hegemony RSS wants to protect and promote. So there is a natural alliance, natural ideological affinity between the top of media and the top of RSS. Second, there is use of state power, use of advertisement, use of police action to silence whoever is, whoever dares to criticize them. Even the BBC, just for showing one documentary which showed some unpalatable truth about Mr. Modi's past, they basically shut down BBC's operation in India. So there is that kind of direct action. And then there is day-to-day micromanagement. And you would recall that the one television channel that dared to be somewhat independent, they were not even critical, it was suddenly bought over. That reminds you of Putin's Russia. You can criticize Mr. Putin, but you may be found in Siberia for 6 months later. So things of that kind are beginning to happen. So Indian media, when I say Indian media, India's mainstream media, large mass media houses, are almost completely controlled. Yes, there are tiny windows, especially windows where the government couldn't care less. I'm allowed to write a column in English. Because they know that not many people read English. Let them do so. So why bother with the formality of stopping this person from writing? But I was involved in the rise at the time of the rise of Hindi television, which is the biggest thing in the country. Practically no Hindi television channel speaks to me, and this is when, for years and years, they had me, wanted to hear every word that I spoke, wanted to pay me to speak anything that I wanted to. No large Hindi newspaper is willing to carry a column that I write. So that's how things are controlled. And I'm not saying I'm all that important, but if micromanagement comes to that level, that they can ensure that one dissenting voice does not reach Hindi viewers, which is what they care for. So that's what's really happening in the Indian media. The worst part is not merely supporting the ruling party, not merely attacking the opposition all the time, but stoking hatred through plain and simple lies every single day. Every day they would discover some Muslim angle behind something. If a Hindu man has done something nasty to his Hindu wife, that's one man doing something to a woman. But if a Muslim man has done something to his wife, then it's a Muslim doing something. This has become a staple of Indian media. Every day they invent things. Every day they conjure up things. Every day they search like vultures for pieces of flesh. Indian media has never sunk so low.
Staying on this topic of media, but turning our focus to the foreign press, Mr. Modi recently visited the United States earlier this year, and he sat down and was interviewed by some of the larger media players within the country, one of whom was Lex Fridman. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work. He's the acclaimed podcaster. His YouTube channel has just shy of 5 million subscribers, to give you an idea of his scale. He sat down with Mr. Modi for over 3 hours, and one thing that I found particularly interesting was he didn't really ask any difficult questions to Mr. Modi. Why do you think the foreign press give Mr. Modi basically a free pass?
I don't know, and honestly, I couldn't care less, because I have some expectations from media in this country. Do I have expectations of international media? No. I have never thought international media as the guardian of democracy all over the world. I know what America has done in Latin America. I know what American press was like at that point. I know how the so-called international liberal media has reacted on Gaza. Those who cannot tell the truth about Gaza, those who cannot report this genocide as genocide, those who cannot say that Israel is killing these people, I do not expect them to say anything meaningful about Indian democracy. So honestly, I have very little expectation. You have had two kinds of things. One, there has been in the international media earlier a general sense of condescension about India and all third world democracies. How can they be democracy? And a bit of a vicarious pleasure when things go wrong. I understand that, and many Indian colleagues report these things. Look, New York Times says this. My sense is, well, I'd look at these things when they start telling truth about their own country and the rest of the world. The other reaction is, of course, as and when whoever is powerful, whoever has money, international media will be kind to them. Same with Mr. Modi. When he was seen to be friends with Mr. Trump, well, you would have some lovely interviews. And now that he is not, things will turn around. So, money and power can purchase many things. Media is one of them.
Given that India is the world's most populous country and supposedly the world's largest democracy, do you think it's a curiosity that the state of Indian politics is not more important or interesting to foreigners?
To my mind, that's a function of something larger, not just Indian democracy, India per se. To the foreigners, and when I say foreigner, I really mean the white North American world, North American European world, the global North as it is called. The global North has always looked at countries like India with a very strange lens, something that was described by Edward Said as Orientalism. They love India as long as it's a country of snake charmers. They love Indians when they do all kinds of strange and weird things. India as weird, India as strange and lovely, India as mystical. But somehow the idea that those who are not white can be rational, can be logical, can have problems which are their own problems, can be normal, that has never struck the rest of the world. And I do not blame them. When you are powerful, you tend to have very squinted eyes. So it's the price that you pay for power that you exercise, that you forget to look at the world as equals. I do not blame them. It is my responsibility to rise to a level where I can look at them in the eyes. So the Western media has done exactly this to Indian democracy. In the 1950s, the Western media had said, India embarking upon elections is a joke. It won't succeed. It succeeded. In 1960s, Western academia wrote books to say India was about to disintegrate. It did not. In 1970s, they said emergency is the end of the Indian story. It was not. And then India was a place of, then there was ethnic strife in the 1980s. And then they said, oh, ethnic strife in India is about to come apart. Funnily, these things never happen about the US. No one says that in the famous election of Mr. George Bush in Florida, no one said that Africa and Asian countries should send a contingent to the US to monitor the quality of elections in the US. Someone should have done that. It was a fraud. When Mr. Trump comes to power, no one says that here is a particularly dangerous person that has been let loose on the world, and the world must come together and speak to these Americans about what's wrong with you. Why have you let loose this character on us, on the rest of the world? Imagine if this was happening in Uganda, what would be the reaction? Oh, these Africans. This happens. Idi Amin, of course, these are African traits. No one says these are American traits of what Mr. Trump is doing today. So, not to put it too fine a point on it, I think a certain racialism informs the entire manner in which the so-called international media looks at India, Indian democracy. But to be fair, this is a fate Indian democracy shares with Brazilian democracy, with South African democracy, and I'm happy to share that trait.
I understand exactly what you're saying when you refer to this racialism or Orientalism infusing the global North's perception of India. Something just a little personal that I'll share with you is, and I really want to pick your brains on it, is that's not reciprocated one iota the way the global South, or in this case India particularly, views someone who's from the Western sphere. In fact, they look upon me with utter reverence, despite how the rest of my sphere views them. I've got my own theory about that. It's almost a form of Stockholm syndrome, emanating from deep-seated insecurity to be accepted by the Western world. What do you think that reveals about the Indian psyche?
It's a colonized self. This is something Ashish Nandy has written again and again about. There is a deep colonial insecurity, which goes back to 19th century. When the white man arrives, he says, I have guns, I have money, I have Bible. What do you have? The Indian at that time doesn't have a good answer. That creates a deep sense of inferiority. And it is that inferiority that keeps informing. Ashish Nandy calls it the loss of self, and the story of the recovery of self. So a certain kind of insecurity, loss of self-respect informs almost everything that happens in India, vis-a-vis the West or vis-a-vis themselves, And interestingly, this is most acute in the cases of those who say, I'm Hindu, I'm for Indian nationalism. They are in fact the worst victims of this sense of inferiority. If you've ever watched Mr. Modi trying to hug these white leaders of the world, every time I cringe. Why are you represent such a large country. You are my prime minister. Why are you so small? Why are you so keen to hug this person who's not very keen to hug you? RSS, BJP propaganda draws so much on Europe. In fact, Mr. Advani's dream, Mr. Advani, who was the leader of the BJP at one point, his entire dream was to have a British kind of parliamentary system in India. So what appears to be a very aggressive nationalism is actually a deep-seated sense of inferiority. It's an attempt to imitate the master. Ashish Nandy again has a beautiful phrase for that. He calls it the intimate enemy. That's what's being played out. It is only in a Gandhi or in a Tagore that self recovers itself and looks at the rest of the world in their eyes and say, when Gandhi was asked, what do you think about Western civilization? You know what his answer was? He said, well, I'll respond when they become civilized. When it becomes a civilization, I'll think about it. I'm not saying his response was good or correct, but it shows a certain level of self-confidence. The beautiful expression that you see is in Tagore, who's not afraid of learning anything from anywhere, because he knows that where he comes from is a place which offers him deep sense of self-assurance. That self-assurance is missing. And that lack of self-assurance, so in that sense, the colonial script continues to play out. And in that sense, decolonization of the mind continues to be one of the biggest challenges for India. We attained political independence, but attaining political independence was accompanied by a complete loss of attention to cultural autonomy. We gained political independence in order to slavishly imitate the West. That is where the problem lies.
Well, thank you for such a wonderful explanation. I think there's definitely some work to be done psychologically, but as comical as it sounds, there's been moments where I truly felt I could probably get away with murder in this country just by virtue of the color of my skin.
Exactly. So this is so strange. There is so in a post-colonial country, you would imagine that people would have some sense of resentment vis-a-vis the white man. No, they don't. Partly because our independence movement did not encourage any form of racism, but partly because of that deep-seated sense of colonization of the mind. That is what comes across when any Indian responds to anyone who is white, who comes from that part of the world. And the trouble is that, and this is about democracy as well, for far too long in the history of democracies, the tail has been wagging the dog. A tiny little part of the world, North America and Europe, has become the norm. The day you have normal history of democracy, that history will be about Indonesia, about Brazil, about Nigeria, about India, hopefully one day about China. It cannot possibly be about some 5% of the world's area and population, about 10% of that. So in order to democratize our thinking about democracy, we need to take the whole world into account. At the moment, all our thinking about democracy is so anti-democratic because it is guided by a tiny, exceptional, truly outlier experience of a few countries that could not be the norm for the rest of the world. That should not be the model for the entire universe.
Just shifting focus, and I can't not ask you this question. Earlier this month, Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition, brought forward allegations of electoral fraud that occurred in the 2024 general election. In your opinion, to what extent are these allegations grounded in reality, and what does this episode reveal about the health of the democratic system?
To my mind, the most significant thing is that an allegation of this kind has been articulated at all. 15 years ago, you wouldn't dare not do that. 20 years ago, you did that, people would throw you out. Because while all other things existed, it was absolutely clear that electoral verdict, the overall verdict, reflected popular mandate. Anyone who lost election was expected to say, thank you very much, I bow my head to the people, I move out. That was the norm. If you lost and complained, everyone thought so poorly of you, which happened. Some politicians did that. but only to realize that there's zero take of what they are saying, and quietly, tail between their legs, they would come back and join the thing. What Rahul Gandhi has said this time, for the time being, let me not say whether it's right or wrong. The fact that the leader of opposition in this country says that elections are being stolen and the whole country has not stood up against him. The media sponsored by the government tried to play all kinds of games. No purchase. So the fact is that the leader of opposition in the country speaks something, that it has some resonance. That itself is huge, because while I would not say that 75 years of Indian democracy have been devoid of any instance of electoral fraud. I can count them on my fingers. There was 1972 in the state of West Bengal, 1983 in Assam, 1987 in Jammu Kashmir. You could add many other elections in Jammu Kashmir in that category. And 1992 in Punjab. These were verdicts which were always dubious. But you would never say this about any national election. You could not say electoral integrity was taken for granted. All kinds of minor malpractices would take place, little complaint here and there. But overall, when a party won an election, everyone said, yes, people have voted for you. That is being questioned. Rahul Gandhi comes up with not just an allegation, he comes up with bulky proof, literally, physically, with 100,000 papers. What should be the reaction of the election body, the election management body, the Election Commission of India? They should have ordered an independent investigation. They should have said, all right, there's conflict of interest. We made those lists that you're complaining about. We'll get someone from outside to check it. What do? They issue threats to the leader of opposition. The chief election commissioner holds a press conference, one of the most shameful episodes that I've watched in my life, where he says, without naming, of course, the leader of opposition, he says, either give an affidavit or issue an apology to the country. I mean, this is cheap street language. So that is the problem. Assuming that Rahul Gandhi has not yet demonstrated that India's elections were stolen. I do not think all the proofs add up to that as of now. They create a ground for suspicion. Are these conclusive proof that the overall election was stolen? No, not yet. But the more the Election Commission tries to dodge it, the worse the suspicions get. The more everyone believes that no, something is wrong. Why are they trying to hide it? So Election Commission is actually making it worse. That, to someone like me who has watched Indian elections now for 40 years, must be one of the lowest moments. Because, we spoke of democratic reforms, how to take India forward. Then we came down and talked about electoral reforms. And now we have to speak about electoral integrity, just the absence of fraud. There was a time when Indian Election Commission enjoyed levels of trust, because I've been a survey researcher and we've monitored it. The level of trust of Indian Election Commission was higher than Indian judiciary. It was comparable to the Indian Army. Today, it has basically sunk to the same level as that of government and political parties. That tells you something. So we really are witnessing some strange and very sad times. And I feel particularly anxious because this is a road from where reversals are very difficult. I look at my neighbors, I look at Bangladesh, I look at Pakistan, and how election bodies lost their legitimacy. And how recovery from that was almost impossible, has been impossible in Pakistan, Bangladesh virtually impossible. It is easy to go down this road, very hard to come up.
Is the Electoral Commission even capable of acting as a check on power, or is it too severely compromised?
Constitutionally speaking, they have all the powers. Constitutionally, legally speaking, exactly with the same kind of powers the Election Commission of India 20 years ago, 30 years ago, had practically held every political party to account. Election Commission of India used to issue orders to say, the following officer looks slightly partisan, remove him by tomorrow morning. Election Commission of India said that while elections are due in Gujarat, but no, they've just had a riot, we shall not hold an election in the shadow of a riot. No matter whether you like it or not, we will not do it. That's the kind of independence the Election Commission exercised. Election Commission of India used to say to Prime Minister, to the government, the following policy decisions are wrong, you cannot take it during the election period, off. And today, the Election Commission looks like an extension of the Home Ministry. Sometimes, I must confess, an extension of the ruling party. They're severely compromised, A, because of their very appointment. The kind of persons who have been appointed are people who are not known to have exercised any autonomy, are incapable of exercising autonomy. Also, in 2019, when one of the election commissioners tried to exercise some autonomy by just giving a note of dissent, which was ineffective anyway, the kind of onslaught he faced from this regime. They went after his wife, they went after his son, and then everyone realized constitutional immunity does not give constitutional immunity to your wife, to your son, to your family, that this is a vindictive regime. So anyone who sits in that position knows that either you toe the line or you go away. And some of them did go away. The election commissioner, within 6 months, quietly resigned and disappeared from public life. All these strange, so the appointment method is compromised. The pressure that's being put is there. The kind of persons who occupy those positions are persons chosen to do this. And the entire functioning of the Election Commission today looks to be the most pliable that I have ever noticed, that I have ever read about.
It's my understanding that citizenship is presumed under the Citizenship Act of 1955, but for the first time in history, the Electoral Commission is now requiring Biharis to provide evidence of their citizenship, which could lead to large-scale voter disenfranchisement. How serious is this assault on voters' rights?
The special intensive revision of in the state of Bihar appears initially to be a case of wanting to clean up the voters list, but that's not what it is. In the garb of cleaning up voters list, the Election Commission of India has upturned two foundational principles of India's universal adult franchise. In a country as large as India, in a country with such low levels of literacy, very poor level of documentations, and very poor access to education, the only way you could have had universal adult franchise was by following two principles. Number one, you are not responsible for getting your name on the voters list. I, the state, the government, is responsible for putting your name. This was the Indian practice. And this practice ensured that our level of enrollment was 95% plus. In the SIR exercise of Bihar, for the first time in India's history, the onus has been shifted. We'll give you a form. If you do not return that form by a set date, sorry, you don't figure on the electoral zones, what can I do? You should have done it. So the onus has been shifted. And we know from all over the world, and the United States of America is the best or the worst example of that. The moment you shift the onus on the voter, bottom 25% drop out. So that's one thing that has happened in Bihar, which I really find very dangerous. And the second thing was that in India, for purposes of being on the voters list, your citizenship was presumed. I knock on your door, you happen to be in India, I presume you are an Indian citizen, Unless someone informs me, unless I have a specific complaint, unless I have good reasons to believe that you are not, in which case I could have asked you for documentation. But from everyone else, all I needed was a self-attested signature. I am a citizen of India. Thank you very much. Done. It was the job of the Home Ministry, as indeed is the case all over the world. It's a government's Home Ministry whose job it is to identify who is a citizen, who is a foreigner, and so on and so forth. For the first time in this exercise of SIR in Bihar, the Election Commission says, no, it's our job to check whether you are a citizen or not. And the onus of proving that you are a citizen is on you. My presumption is that I don't know whether you're a citizen or not. You prove. You have to give documents. In a country with such low level of documentation, a country that does not issue any citizenship certificate at all, there is no citizenship card in India. In a country where bottom 1/3 would not have any of the formal documents that you want. In that country, Election Commission says everyone has to attach documents to prove that they are Indian citizens. And funnily, to make it worse, the one document that people in India do have, which is called Aadhaar, an identification paper, which over the last 20 years, all Indian governments have pushed, and you are being asked to link everything possible, your bank account, your airport security, everything is linked to Aadhaar. Election Commission says, thank you very much, we won't accept that. So the one document that people do have, the Commission says we will not accept it. The documents that the Commission knows people won't have are the ones that are being demanded. Birth certificate. Who has birth certificates in India? 2 to 3% persons have birth certificate. They want passport. They want government issued IDs. All these are 2%, 5%, 3%. Or they want matriculation certificate, which is 35, 40%. But then are you saying that if you are not educated, you cannot be the voter? So in a sense, what's happening in Bihar, and it's not limited to Bihar because it's an all India order. Bihar happens to be the first state where this is being tried out. This takes you back to what happened in 19th century America. When after the Civil War, the blacks had political freedom, they would have become voters. Indeed, they did become voters. But the American South, the whites in the American South would not allow them to be voters. So what do? They come up with a series of laws to say you require this document, you require that certificate, and only those documents and certificates were demanded which the blacks did not possess. This is almost exactly what is being played out in Bihar today. And that's why I think this is a upturning of the universal adult franchise. This cannot but have the only consequence would be to seriously dilute the universality of the universal adult franchise.
You began this interview by describing India as an improbable democracy. Indeed, a contingent of commentators have described it in that way because of its complex patchwork of faiths, ethnicities, separatist movements. In this way, it's drawn some parallels to the former state of Yugoslavia. Do you think India will be able to continue to defy the odds, or do you think it will eventually meet a similar fate?
I think and I hope India will survive. When we wrote this book, Crafting State Nations, the central argument of this book is that given India's deep diversity, the universal experience of democracy would tell you that India was going to fail. India did not fail because India did not follow the European script of nation states. What was that script? One nation, one language, one culture, possibly one religion. India said no. What India did was that India institutionalized these diversities. Instead of feeling awkward about these diversities, India allowed those diversities a free play from the front door. Our national anthem is about celebrating these different regions. Any other nation would say India, uniform, only India. What is India's national anthem? Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravid, Utkal, Banga. It begins by naming these identities, which is to acknowledge the fact that India exists in and through being Bengali, being Tamil, being Punjabi. This is the great uniqueness of the Indian experience, of the Indian experiment, which is to say, we are not awkward, we are not shy, we are not brushing our diversities under the carpet. We're proud of it. We allow it not only legitimate cultural expression, we allow it a political expression. We have parties which roughly translated would mean party of the Telugu nation. You could have banned those parties. India said, wonderful. It is by providing expression to diversity that India normalized them. What worries me is that now, having instituted a wonderful example for the rest of the world, which we call state nation. India was state nation, not a nation state. Now India is trying to replicate the failed European model of nation state of the first half of the 20th century. That's an utterly failed model. The model that was tried in France and Germany, through which France was turned French, through which Germany was made Germanic. They were not Germanic to begin with. It's through coercion, it is through extermination, it is through cultural repression that a certain homogeneity was introduced. India chose the path of non-homogeneity. Sadly, and that is what more than anything else, what makes me sad about what the BJP and the current regime is doing, is that this is a pathetic imitation of a failed European model. They are trying to do to India what was tried in Europe. That is to say, one nation, one culture, one language, one religion. If that is followed and if that continues for very long, I suspect that goes against the very foundations of Indian democracy, and that has the very serious danger of breaking up India if this kind of a thing is continued. But somehow I have faith. I have faith. I'm not a religious person. I don't pray. But the closest I come to a faith is a faith in this civilization. This civilization has survived 5,000 years. It has seen all kinds of people come and go. And the culture survives. There's something in this earth that allows differences to flourish. It happened during Ashoka's time. It happened during Akbar's time. A country that gave birth to Lord Buddha, a country that gave birth to Mahatma Gandhi, will not give in so easily.
In this series, one thing we want to do with each guest is put to them the proposal I'm about to put to you. So if logistics and diplomatic relations were no impediment, if you could talk to anyone around the world about political systems or democracy, be they a head of state or a commentator, who would be the person you'd like to talk to, and what would be the one question in particular you'd like to ask them?
It's hard. I'd probably like to speak to Nelson Mandela. He's not there. I'd like to ask him, how did you get the courage not to hate the white after what they did to you? How did you manage to institute love, togetherness, and forgiveness in politics? He's no more, but I would have liked to ask him that.
I'd love to hear his response to it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I hope, regardless of what people think about what you've said. I hope that they can at least, they're at least aware of how important it is for the democratic health of the country and the public good, particularly in the world's largest democracy. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.